Catherine, a nurse from a small town, came to care for 10-year-old Sophie, who was barely whispering while bedridden. One evening, the girl confessed, trembling, "They want me to be quiet." These words turned Catherine's life upside down. What is hidden behind the perfect facade of a wealthy family? And how far will the nurse go to uncover the truth? The morning sun barely pierced the thick Oregon mist as Catherine Baker stepped out of her modest apartment in Portland. At 38, she was no stranger to new beginnings. A seasoned nurse with a knack for caregiving, Catherine had spent years tending to the elderly, easing their final days with quiet compassion. But today was different. Today, she was starting a job that felt like uncharted territory, caring for a 10-year-old girl named Sophie Clark, who, according to the agency, was bedridden with a mysterious illness. The thought of working with a child stirred a mix of curiosity and unease in Catherine's chest. She adjusted the strap of her worn leather bag, packed with medical supplies and a notepad, and headed for the bus stop. The ride to the suburbs was long, winding through Portland's eclectic neighborhoods before giving way to sprawling lawns and modern homes. The Clark residence was in Lake Oswego, a wealthy enclave where manicured hedges and sleek SUVs were the norm. As the bus hissed to a stop, Catherine stepped onto a quiet street lined with towering pines. The air smelled faintly of rain and cedar, a stark contrast to the city's hum she was used to. Ahead loomed the Clark House, a two-story masterpiece of glass and stone, its facade so pristine it looked like a model home from a magazine. Too perfect, Catherine thought, her nurse's instinct prickling. Houses this flawless often hid something. She approached the wrought iron gate, her sneakers crunching on the gravel path. A small intercom buzzed to life after she pressed the button. "Yes," a man's voice barked, clipped and impatient. "Catherine Baker," she replied, keeping her tone professional. "I'm a nurse for Sophie." A pause, then the gate clicked open. Catherine walked up the path, her eyes scanning the property. The lawn was immaculate, not a blade out of place, and the windows gleamed like mirrors. It was beautiful, yes, but lifeless, like a stage set waiting for actors. The front door swung open before she could knock, revealing a tall man in his early 40s. Eric Clark, she presumed. He was broad-shouldered, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to measure her in a single glance. His navy blazer and crisp, white shirt screamed corporate success, but his expression was guarded, almost cold. "You're late," Eric said, though Catherine's watch told her she was 5 minutes early. "Sorry if there was a mix-up," she replied smoothly, brushing off the jab. "I'm here for Sophie." Eric grunted and stepped aside. "Laura's waiting inside. Come on." The interior of the house was as flawless as the outside. Polished hardwood floors stretched endlessly, reflecting the glow of a crystal chandelier. The air carried a faint scent of lavender cleaner, masking any trace of lived-in warmth. Catherine's gaze darted to the details. A spotless leather couch, a glass coffee table without a single smudge, and framed photos of Eric, Laura, and Sophie, all smiling in a way that felt rehearsed. To stage, she thought again, her unease growing. Laura Clark appeared from a hallway, her slight frame almost swallowed by an oversized sweater. She was younger than Eric, maybe mid-30s, with pale skin and dark circles under her eyes that no makeup could hide. Her blonde hair was pulled into a messy bun, and her hands fidgeted as she approached. "Catherine, right?" she said, her voice high and nervous. "Thank you for coming. We were so grateful." "Happy to help," Catherine replied, offering a warm smile she hoped would ease Laura's tension. It didn't. Laura's eyes flicked to Eric, then back to Catherine, as if seeking permission to continue. "Sophie's upstairs," Laura said quickly. "I'll show you." Eric lingered in the living room, his arms crossed, watching them ascend the staircase. Catherine felt his stare like a weight on her back. The second floor was just as pristine, with plush carpeting that muffled their steps. Laura led her to a door at the end of the hall, pausing before opening it. "She's fragile," Laura whispered, her voice cracking. "Please be gentle." Catherine nodded, her heart tightening. She cared for frail patients before, but something in Laura's tone hinted at more than physical weakness. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit room. In the center stood a large bed with a carved wooden headboard, and on it lay Sophie. The girl was small for her age, her thin frame nearly lost in a sea of white bedding. Her blonde hair fanned across the pillow, and her skin was so pale it seemed translucent. But it was her eyes that stopped Catherine cold, wide, gray, and fixed on the ceiling, brimming with a quiet fear. "Sophie, honey," Laura said softly, "this is Catherine. She's here to take care of you." Sophie's head turned slowly, her gaze locking onto Catherine. For a moment, neither spoke. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, Sophie said, "Hi." It was a single syllable, but it carried a weight Catherine couldn't place. Part greeting, part plea. "Hey, Sophie," Catherine replied, kneeling beside the bed to meet her at eye level. "I'm going to be here to help you feel better, okay?" Sophie's lips twitched, almost a smile, but her eyes darted past Catherine to the doorway where Laura stood. Then, faintly, she nodded. Catherine's gut twisted. This wasn't just a sick child. Something was wrong. Deeply, viscerally wrong. Laura began explaining Sophie's routine. Medications at specific hours, light meals, and rest. "The doctors aren't sure what's causing it," she said, her words tumbling out too fast. "They've done tests, but it's complicated. She can't move much, but she understands everything." Catherine listened, jotting notes, but her attention kept drifting to Sophie. The girl's hands clutched the blanket, her knuckles white. When Laura mentioned Eric's name, something about him picking up prescriptions, Sophie's grip tightened. It was subtle, but Catherine caught it. Her years of reading patients' cues screamed that this was no coincidence. "Anything else I should know?" Catherine asked, keeping her tone neutral. Laura hesitated, glancing at the door. "Just follow the schedule. Eric's particular about it." She forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'll let you settle in." As Laura left, Catherine pulled a chair beside Sophie's bed. The room was a child's dream. Stuffed animals on a shelf, pastel walls adorned with drawings of flowers and stars. Yet, like the rest of the house, it felt untouched, as if Sophie hadn't played here in years. "You like to draw?" Catherine asked, nodding at the artwork. Sophie's eyes flickered to the wall, then back to the ceiling. "Used to," she murmured. Catherine smiled, hiding her concern. "Maybe we'll try it sometime. Get you some crayons." Sophie didn't respond, but her fingers relaxed slightly. It was a start. Catherine began unpacking her supplies, her mind racing. The house, the parents, the girl's fear, it all pointed to something she couldn't yet name. She'd seen families hide truths before. Neglect, denial, even shame over a child's condition. But this felt different, darker. As she measured Sophie's pulse, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the hall. Sophie's body stiffened, her breath catching. Catherine glanced at the door, her own pulse quickening. The steps paused, then retreated. Eric, she guessed. Why did his presence alone terrify this girl? By the time Catherine finished her first shift, the sun had dipped below the pines, casting long shadows across the Clark house. She said goodbye to Sophie, promising to return tomorrow, and stepped into the cool evening air. Laura thanked her profusely at the door, but Eric only nodded, his eyes narrowing as she passed. The gate clanged shut behind her, and Catherine exhaled, realizing she'd been holding her breath. On the bus ride home, she replayed the day. Sophie's whispered greeting, her clenched hands, the sterile perfection of the house. Most nurses would chalk it up to a tough case and move on. But Catherine wasn't most nurses. She'd learned long ago that patients often spoke loudest through silence, and Sophie was screaming for help. Whatever was happening in that house, Catherine vowed to uncover it. She just didn't know how deep the truth was buried, or how dangerous it would be to dig. Catherine Baker woke to the patter of rain against her apartment window, the gray Portland dawn mirroring the unease that had settled in her bones. Her first day at the Clark house lingered like a bad dream. Sophie's fearful eyes, Eric's cold stare, the sterile perfection of their home. She sipped her coffee, staring at the notepad where she'd jotted Sophie's medication schedule. Something about it gnawed at her, though she couldn't yet pin it down. Today, she resolved, she'd pay closer attention. If Sophie was scared, Catherine needed to know why. The bus to Lake Oswego felt slower this morning, each stop stretching her anticipation. By the time she reached the Clark's gate, the rain had softened to a drizzle, leaving the stone house glistening under a veil of mist. She buzzed the intercom, and Laura's voice crackled through, softer than yesterday. "Come in, Catherine." The gate clicked open, and she stepped onto the gravel path, her sneakers damp from puddles. The house loomed ahead, its windows reflecting the overcast sky like unblinking eyes. Inside, the air was as pristine as before, scented with that same lavender cleaner. Laura met her in the foyer, clutching a mug of tea she didn't seem to drink. "Sophie's upstairs," she said, her smile brittle. She had a rough night. Her eyes darted toward the living room, where Eric sat at a glass desk, typing on a laptop. He didn't look up, but Catherine felt his presence like a shadow. "Anything I should know?" Catherine asked, keeping her tone light. Laura hesitated, her fingers tightening on the mug. "Just keep her calm. She gets anxious sometimes." Before Catherine could press further, Laura hurried off, muttering about errands. Eric's typing paused for a split second, then resumed. Catherine's skin prickled. She was being watched. Upstairs, Sophie's room was dim, the curtains half drawn against the gray light. The girl lay in bed, her small frame swallowed by blankets. Her eyes flicked to Catherine, and a faint spark of recognition softened her face. "You came back," she whispered, as if she'd doubted it. "Of course I did," Catherine said, pulling the chair closer. "Told you I'd be here." She checked Sophie's pulse, steady but weak, and noted her pallor. The girl's hands were cold, her breathing shallow. Catherine forced a smile. "How about we open these curtains? Get some light in here." Sophie's gaze darted to the door. "He doesn't like it," she murmured. Catherine's heart skipped. "Who?" "Your dad." Sophie nodded, barely perceptible, then looked away. Catherine's mind raced. Eric's influence hung over this house like a storm cloud, but she needed more than a hunch. She busied herself with Sophie's morning routine, checking vitals, preparing a tray of oatmeal, but her eyes kept wandering to the medication bottles on the nightstand. There were 4, 2 for pain, 1 for sleep, and 1 labeled vaguely as a supplement. The doses seemed high for a child, but Catherine wasn't a doctor. Still, her nurse's gut screamed caution. As she spoon-fed Sophie, Catherine tried to keep things light. "Got a favorite book?" she asked. "I used to love adventure stories when I was your age." Sophie's lips twitched. "I like mysteries," she said softly, "where people find out secrets." Catherine grinned. "My kind of girl. Maybe we'll read one together." But Sophie's smile faded as footsteps echoed in the hall, heavy, deliberate. Catherine's pulse quickened. The door creaked open, and Eric stood there, his broad frame filling the doorway. His eyes swept the room, landing on the tray. "She eating?" he asked, his voice flat. Catherine nodded, her throat tight. "Slowly, but she's trying." Eric stepped closer, his gaze flicking to Sophie. The girl shrank into the pillows, her spoon trembling in Catherine's hand. "Good," he said, then turned to Catherine. "Stick to the schedule. No changes." It wasn't a request. He left without another word, the door clicking shut behind him. Catherine exhaled, realizing she'd been holding her breath. Sophie's eyes were fixed on the ceiling again, her face pale. "You okay, kiddo?" Catherine asked gently. Sophie didn't answer, but her fingers clutched the blanket. Catherine's chest ached. She'd seen fear in patients before, fear of pain, of death, but this was different. This was personal. The day passed in a blur of routine. Meds, meals, repositioning Sophie to prevent bed sores. But Catherine's mind was elsewhere. During a quiet moment, she studied the medication bottles more closely. The supplement bottle caught her eye. Its label was generic, the print smudged. She jotted down the name, promising herself to check it later. When Laura returned that afternoon, Catherine tried probing. "These meds," she said casually, "they're helping Sophie sleep, but she seems so tired. Maybe we could talk to the doctor about adjusting them?" Laura's face tightened. "Eric handles that," she said, avoiding Catherine's gaze. "The doctor says it's fine." She busied herself with a stack of mail, effectively ending the conversation. Catherine's suspicion deepened. That evening, alone with Sophie, she tried a different tack. "You said you like mysteries," she said, keeping her voice low. "If you had a secret, would you tell someone you trusted?" Sophie's eyes met hers, wide and searching. For a moment, Catherine thought she'd speak. Then the girl's gaze dropped, and she whispered, "They don't want me to talk." Her voice was so faint Catherine almost missed it. "Who's they?" Catherine pressed, her heart pounding. But Sophie shook her head, curling into herself. The moment was gone. Back home, Catherine couldn't shake Sophie's words. She pulled out her phone and texted Emily, an old friend who worked as a pharmacist. "Can you look up a med for me? Not sure if it's legit." She sent the name from the smudged label, her fingers trembling. Emily replied quickly, "Give me a day." Sounds odd for a kid. Sleep eluded Catherine that night. She lay awake, replaying Sophie's fear, Eric's control, Laura's evasion. The Clark house was a puzzle, and every piece pointed to something wrong. But what? Neglect? Over-medication? Or something worse? She thought of her own childhood, of moments when she'd felt powerless. She'd become a nurse to protect people like that younger self, and like Sophie. Whatever was happening, she couldn't walk away. The next morning, Catherine arrived early, determined to dig deeper. Laura was out, but Eric greeted her at the door, his expression unreadable. "You're settling in," he said, more statement than question. "Trying to," Catherine replied, forcing a smile. His eyes lingered a second too long, and she felt a chill. Upstairs, Sophie seemed quieter than ever, her eyes dull. As Catherine adjusted the foredrip, she noticed something new, a faint bruise on Sophie's wrist, like a thumbprint. Her stomach dropped. "Sophie," she whispered, "did someone hurt you?" The girl's eyes filled with tears, but she shook her head. "I'm okay," she lied, her voice breaking. Catherine's resolve hardened. She didn't have proof. Not yet, but Sophie's fear was real. And fear like that didn't come from nothing. As she left the house that evening, Emily's text lit up her phone. "That med? It's a heavy tranquilizer. No way it's for a 10-year-old. Be careful, Kath." Catherine stood frozen on the darkening street, the Clark house looming behind her. Sophie's whispered words echoed in her mind. "They don't want me to talk." Whatever secret this family was hiding, it was bigger than she'd imagined, and far more dangerous. She clutched her bag, the weight of her decision settling in. She was in too deep to turn back now. Catherine Baker's apartment was silent except for the faint hum of her laptop, its glow casting shadows across the cluttered desk. It was past midnight, and the weight of Emily's text still hung over her. "That med? It's a heavy tranquilizer. No ways for a 10-year-old. Be careful, Kath." The words looped in her mind as she stared at the screen, researching the drug's effects. Drowsiness, confusion, suppressed breathing. Side effects that matched Sophie's symptoms too closely to be coincidence. Catherine's coffee had gone cold, but sleep wasn't an option. Not when a little girl's life might depend on what she did next. The Portland rain had stopped, leaving the city draped in a damp chill. Catherine's thoughts churned as she replayed her days at the Clark house. Sophie's whispered confession, "They don't want me to talk," felt like a plea she couldn't ignore. The bruise on the girl's wrist, faint but unmistakable, haunted her. Eric's controlling presence, Laura's nervous silence, the pristine house that felt more like a prison. It all pointed to something sinister. But suspicion wasn't proof, and Catherine knew she was treading dangerous ground. She was just a nurse, not a detective. Yet every instinct screamed that Sophie needed her to be more. By morning, Catherine's resolve had solidified. She'd go back to the Clark house, keep her eyes open, and find something concrete. As she boarded the bus to Lake Oswego, her bag felt heavier, stuffed with her notepad, a small flashlight, and her phone, tools for a mission she hadn't fully admitted to herself. The suburbs unfolded outside the window, their manicured calm a stark contrast to the storm brewing in her mind. When she reached the Clark's gate, the house stood as imposing as ever, its glass windows reflecting a slate-gray sky. Laura answered the door, her face drawn. "You're early," she said, her voice brittle. Dark circles framed her eyes, and her hands fidgeted with the hem of her sweater. "Thought I'd get a head start," Catherine replied, forcing a smile. "How's Sophie?" Laura's gaze flicked upstairs. "Same. Quiet." She hesitated, then added, "Eric's working from home today." It sounded like a warning. Catherine's stomach tightened, but she nodded. "I'll head up." As she climbed the stairs, she felt Eric's presence before she saw him. He stood in the hallway, a coffee mug in hand, his eyes narrowing as she approached Sophie's room. "Everything on schedule?" he asked, his tone clipped. "So far," Catherine said, meeting his gaze. His stare lingered, searching, and she fought the urge to look away. Finally, he stepped aside, but his footsteps echoed behind her as she entered the room. Sophie lay in bed, her blonde hair fanned across the pillow. Her eyes brightened slightly at Catherine's arrival, but fear still clung to her expression. "Hey, kiddo," Catherine said softly, checking the girl's pulse. It was weak, her skin clammy. The bruise on her wrist was darker today, a silent accusation. Catherine's heart pounded, but she kept her movements steady, aware of Eric lingering just outside. The morning routine was mechanical, vitals, breakfast, medications, but Catherine's focus was elsewhere. She studied the pill bottles again, noting their placement. The tranquilizer, disguised as a supplement, sat innocently among the others. She needed to know more, where it came from, who prescribed it. During a quiet moment, while Sophie dozed, Catherine slipped her phone from her pocket and snapped a photo of the bottle, her hands trembling. It felt like crossing a line, but she couldn't stop now. At noon, Laura brought a tray of soup, her hands shaking as she set it down. "Eric's in a meeting," she whispered, glancing at the door. "He doesn't like changes to Sophie's care." Her voice cracked, and for a moment, Catherine saw something in her eyes, guilt, maybe, or fear. "Laura," Catherine said carefully, "I'm worried about Sophie. Some of these meds, they seem strong. Have you talked to the doctor lately?" Laura froze, her lips parting as if to speak. Then she shook her head. "Eric handles it. He says it's what she needs." She fled the room before Catherine could press further. Alone with Sophie, Catherine sat by the bed, her mind racing. She needed answers, but confronting Eric directly was too risky. Instead, she turned to the girl. "Sophie," she said gently, "if something's wrong, you can tell me. I'm here to help." Sophie's eyes welled up, but she shook her head. "He'll know," she whispered. "He always knows." Catherine's chest ached. "Who?" "Your dad." Sophie nodded, her fingers twisting the blanket. Catherine wanted to push, but the girl's fear stopped her. She couldn't force the truth, not yet. That afternoon, while Eric was on a call, Catherine seized her chance. She told Sophie she was stepping out to grab supplies, then slipped into the hallway. The house was eerily quiet, its perfection stifling. She crept toward Eric's office, her pulse hammering. The door was ajar, revealing a sleek desk piled with papers. She hesitated. Snooping could cost her job, or worse, but Sophie's face flashed in her mind. She stepped inside. The papers were mostly invoices, but one caught her eye, a pharmacy receipt for the tranquilizer, dated weeks ago. No doctor's name, just a cash payment. Her hand shook as she snapped a photo, then froze as footsteps approached. She shoved the phone in her pocket and grabbed a random file, pretending to tidy up. Eric appeared in the doorway, his eyes narrowing. "What are you doing?" he demanded. Catherine's mouth went dry. "Thought I saw Sophie's chart," she lied, holding up the file. Must have grabbed the wrong one. His gaze bored into her, but he stepped back. "Stay out of here," he said, his voice low. "Focus on your job." She nodded, heart racing, and retreated to Sophie's room. The girl was awake, watching her with wide eyes. "You okay?" Sophie whispered. Catherine forced a smile. "Yeah, kiddo. Just figuring things out." That evening, Catherine met Emily at a diner near her apartment. Rain streaked the windows as she showed her friend the photos. Emily's face paled. "Kath, this is bad. That drug, it's not just strong, it's controlled. Kids shouldn't touch it. And no prescription? That's a red flag." Catherine's stomach churned. "What's it do long-term?" Emily leaned closer. "It can shut down the nervous system, make her seem sicker than she is. If someone's giving it on purpose," she didn't finish, but the implication hung heavy. Back home, Catherine paced, her mind a tangle of fear and determination. The receipt, the bruise, Sophie's words. It was all coming together, but she needed more. She couldn't go to the police with guesses. Eric was watching her now, his warning clear. One wrong move, and she'd be out, or worse, Sophie would pay the price. As she lay in bed, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stop asking questions. Her blood ran cold. She stared at the screen, the words searing into her. Eric? Someone else? She didn't know, but the message confirmed one thing. She was getting close. Too close. Catherine clutched her phone, Sophie's terrified face vivid in her mind. She was no hero, just a nurse who cared too much. But caring was enough to keep going. Tomorrow, she'd find a way to protect Sophie, even if it meant risking everything. The truth was out there, buried in that perfect house, and she was determined to dig it up. The Portland dawn broke gray and heavy, rain tapping a relentless rhythm against Catherine Baker's window. She hadn't slept. The anonymous text, "Stop asking questions," burned in her mind, its threat as real as the bruise on Sophie's wrist. Catherine's hands trembled as she poured coffee, her laptop open to the photos she'd taken, the smudged tranquilizer bottle, the pharmacy receipt with no doctor's name. Each piece was a shard of a puzzle, and Sophie was at its center, trapped in a house that felt more like a cage. Catherine knew she couldn't wait any longer. Today, she'd act, no matter the cost. The bus to Lake Oswego swayed through slick streets, the suburbs blurring past. Catherine's bag held her usual supplies, plus a folded note with the name of a trusted doctor, Dr. Rachel Holt, a pediatrician she'd worked with years ago. If she could get Sophie examined, maybe Rachel could confirm what the tranquilizers were doing. But doubt gnawed at her. Would the police believe a nurse over a wealthy family? Would Sophie be safe if Catherine pushed too hard? She clutched her phone, the threatening text a silent warning. Still, she thought of Sophie's whispered plea. He'll know, and her resolve hardened. Fear wouldn't stop her now. At the Clark house, the gate buzzed open without a word. Catherine's sneakers crunched on wet gravel, the stone facade looming like a fortress. Laura met her at the door, her face pale, eyes darting as if expecting trouble. "Sophie's upstairs," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "She's not great today." Catherine's chest tightened. "I'll check on her." She glanced around, expecting Eric's shadow, but the foyer was empty. "Is Eric here?" Laura hesitated. "He's in his office. Meetings all day." Her hands twisted together, and Catherine caught a flicker of something. Guilt, maybe, or desperation. Before she could ask more, Laura slipped away, leaving the air thick with unspoken tension. Upstairs, Sophie's room was dim, the curtains drawn tight. The girl lay still, her breathing shallow, her gray eyes fixed on the ceiling. Catherine knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Hey, kiddo," she said softly. "How's my favorite mystery fan?" Sophie's lips twitched, but her gaze flickered to the door. "He was here," she whispered. "Last night. He gave me more." Catherine's blood ran cold. "More pills." Sophie nodded, her hands trembling under the blanket. Catherine checked her pulse. Too slow, too weak. Rage flared in her chest, but she kept her voice calm. "I'm going to fix this, Sophie. I promise." The morning routine was a blur. Vitals, a light breakfast Sophie barely touched, but Catherine's focus was on the pill bottles. She slipped the tranquilizer bottle into her bag, replacing it with a dummy from her supplies to avoid suspicion. It was a risk, but she needed evidence. As she adjusted Sophie's she whispered, "I'm getting you help today. Hang in there." Sophie's eyes welled up. "Don't leave me," she said, her voice breaking. Catherine squeezed her hand. "I won't. Not ever." The words felt like a vow, one she'd fight to keep. Midday brought a chance. Laura was out, and Eric's office door was shut, muffled voices leaking through. Catherine texted Rachel, arranging a discreet visit to check Sophie's condition. But doubt crept in. How would she get Sophie out without Eric noticing? She needed a distraction. As she tidied the room, she heard heavy footsteps. Eric appeared in the doorway, his eyes scanning the nightstand. "Where's the bottle?" he asked, his voice low and sharp. Catherine's heart lurched. "Which one?" she said, feigning confusion. "They're all here." His gaze locked on her, cold and searching. "Don't play games, Catherine. I know you've been poking around." He stepped closer, towering over her. Sophie shrank into the bed, her breath hitching. Catherine stood her ground, her pulse racing. "I'm just doing my job, Eric. Making sure Sophie's okay." His jaw tightened, but before he could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, cursing under his breath, and stormed out. Catherine exhaled, her knees weak. She had minutes, maybe less. She dialed Rachel, confirming the plan, then called the police, her voice steady despite her fear. "I'm a nurse at a house in Lake Oswego. I think a child's being harmed. Wrong medications, maybe worse. Please hurry." The dispatcher promised a patrol, but time crawled. Catherine stayed with Sophie, keeping her calm, when the door swung open again. Eric was back, holding the dummy bottle she'd left. "What's this?" he demanded, his face flushed with anger. Catherine's mouth went dry. "It's the same one," she lied, but her voice wavered. He stepped closer, the bottle clenched in his fist. "You're done here," he growled. "Pack your things." Before she could answer, Sophie's voice cut through, weak but clear. "Stop it," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You're making me sick. I know you are." Eric froze, his eyes darting to Sophie. Catherine seized the moment, stepping between them. "She's telling the truth, Eric. Those pills aren't for her. I've got proof." His face twisted, rage, panic, something darker. He lunged for the nightstand, grabbing the remaining bottles, but a sharp knock echoed downstairs. "Police!" a voice called. Eric's hand froze, his breath ragged. Catherine's relief was tempered by fear. She'd sparked a fire, and there was no going back. Officers flooded the house, their radios crackling. Catherine stayed by Sophie, shielding her as Eric shouted denials. "This is insane. She's sick. Ask her doctor." But his voice cracked, betraying him. Laura rushed in, her face ashen, and collapsed into a chair, sobbing. The lead officer, a woman with a calm authority, took the bottles Catherine handed over, her expression grim. "These need testing," Catherine said, passing her photos and the receipt. "They're not for a child. She's been getting worse because of them." Sophie clung to Catherine's hand, her voice barely audible. "He said I had to take them. For the money." The words hit like a thunderclap. Laura gasped, covering her mouth, while Eric's face drained of color. The officer turned to Eric. "Sir, step outside. We're talking now." He resisted, but another officer guided him away. Catherine stayed with Sophie, stroking her hair as paramedics arrived to check her. Rachel slipped in, her face tight with concern, and confirmed what Catherine feared. Sophie's symptoms screamed overdose, not illness. As the police searched the house, they found a locked drawer in Eric's office. Inside were insurance papers, policies naming Sophie, with payouts tied to a chronic condition. Catherine's stomach churned. It wasn't just negligence. It was calculated. Sophie was whisked to the hospital, Catherine promising to follow. As she left the house, Laura grabbed her arm, tears streaming. "I didn't know," she choked. "He said it was temporary. I swear." Catherine pulled away, her voice firm. "You should have protected her." She walked into the rain, the weight of Sophie's trust anchoring her. The truth was out, raw and ugly, but it wasn't over. Not until Sophie was safe for good. The fluorescent lights of Portland's pediatric hospital buzzed softly, casting a sterile glow over the hallway where Catherine Baker sat. Her hands clutched a paper coffee cup, now cold, as she stared at the door to Sophie Clark's room. It had been 3 days since the police stormed the Clark house, 3 days since Sophie's trembling voice had shattered the lies. He said, "I had to take them. For the money." The memory of those words still sent a shiver through Catherine, but so did the relief of knowing Sophie was finally safe. The hospital's hum felt like a lifeline, a stark contrast to the suffocating perfection of that Lake Oswego mansion. Yet, as Catherine waited, a knot of worry lingered. Justice was coming, but would it be enough to heal a girl who'd been betrayed by her own family? The past days had been a whirlwind. After Sophie's hospital transfer, Catherine had spent hours with the police, recounting every detail. The tranquilizer bottle, the smudged receipt, Sophie's whispered fears, the bruise on her wrist. The officers listened intently, their notepads filling with her words. Lab results confirmed her suspicions. The drugs were heavy sedatives, enough to keep Sophie weak and dazed, mimicking a chronic illness. The insurance papers found in Eric's office painted a grim picture, a payout scheme tied to Sophie's condition, with Eric as the mastermind. Catherine's evidence, photos, notes, her own testimony, had cracked the case wide open. But sitting here now, she wondered if she'd done enough, fast enough. A nurse passed by, offering a kind nod, and Catherine managed a faint smile. She'd been at Sophie's side as much as allowed, balancing hospital visits with police interviews. Each time she saw Sophie, the girl seemed a little brighter, her cheeks less pale, her eyes less haunted. But healing wasn't just physical. Sophie had been through a nightmare, and Catherine knew the scars ran deep. She thought of her own childhood, moments of feeling unseen, and vowed to be the anchor Sophie needed. The hospital door creaked open, and Dr. Rachel Holt stepped out, her face tired but warm. "She's awake," Rachel said. "You can go in." Catherine stood, her heart lifting. Inside, Sophie sat propped against pillows, a colorful blanket draped over her. The foreline was gone, and sunlight streamed through the window, catching flecks of gold in her blonde hair. She looked small but alive, a far cry from the ghostly figure in that dim bedroom. "Hey, kiddo," Catherine said, pulling a chair close. "Looking pretty strong today." Sophie's lips curved into a shy smile. "I feel better," she said, her voice soft but clear. "They said I can eat real food soon." Catherine laughed, the sound easing her tension. "Ice cream's on me when you're ready." She reached in her bag, pulling out a worn mystery novel. "Thought we could start this. You said you like secrets being solved, right?" Sophie's eyes lit up, and for a moment, she was just a kid, not a victim. They talked about the book, about silly things like favorite colors, and Catherine felt a warmth she hadn't in days. But Sophie's gaze eventually drifted to the window, her smile fading. "What's going to happen?" she asked quietly. "To Mom?" "To him." Catherine's throat tightened. She'd avoided this, wanting to shield Sophie, but the girl deserved honesty. "Your mom's talking to the police," she said carefully. "She's saying she didn't know everything, but they're figuring it out. As for Eric," she paused, choosing her words. "He's in trouble, Sophie. Big trouble. He can't hurt you anymore." Sophie nodded, her fingers tracing the blanket's pattern. "She was scared of him too," she whispered. "Mom." "I saw it." Catherine reached for her hand, squeezing gently. "You don't have to worry about that now. You got people who care about you. Me, the doctors, your aunt. We're all here." Sophie's Aunt Ellen had arrived yesterday from Seattle, a warm woman with a laugh that filled rooms. She'd taken one look at Sophie and burst into tears, promising to give her a real home. Catherine had liked her instantly, sensing the love Sophie so desperately needed. But leaving Sophie to Ellen's care stirred mixed feelings. Catherine wasn't family, just a nurse who'd gotten too close. Yet Sophie's trust felt like a gift, one she'd carry forever. A knock interrupted them. Detective Lopez, the lead officer, stepped in, her expression serious but kind. "Catherine, got a minute?" she asked, nodding toward the hall. Catherine glanced at Sophie, who gave a small nod. "Be right back," she promised, following Lopez outside. The detective's eyes were steady, her voice low. "We've got enough to charge Eric. Child endangerment, fraud, attempted harm. The DA's pushing for a full trial. Laura's cooperating, says she was under duress. Might get a plea deal." Catherine exhaled, relief mingling with anger. "Will Sophie have to testify?" Lopez shook her head. "Not if we can avoid it. Your evidence is solid. Photos, the bottle, your notes. You built a strong case." She paused, her tone softening. "You saved her, you know." Catherine looked away, her throat tight. "I just did my job." "More than that," Lopez said. "Most would have looked the other way." Back in the room, Sophie was flipping through the novel, her brow furrowed like a detective's. Catherine smiled, settling beside her. They read a chapter together, Sophie's voice growing stronger with each page. When a nurse came to check her vitals, Catherine stepped out, needing air. In the hospital garden, she sat on a bench, the damp wood grounding her. The case wasn't over. Trials, headlines, questions loomed, but Sophie was free. That was enough for now. Weeks later, the trial began. Catherine sat in the courtroom, her hands clasped, as Eric faced the judge. His polished suit couldn't hide the panic in his eyes. Evidence piled up. Lab reports, Sophie's medical records, the insurance scam laid bare. Laura testified, her voice shaking, admitting she let Eric control her out of fear. The jury didn't take long. Eric was sentenced to 7 years, his wealth no shield against justice. Laura got probation, ordered to undergo counseling, barred from contacting Sophie until Ellen deemed it safe. Catherine visited Sophie one last time before Ellen took her to Seattle. The girl was stronger now, her laughter echoing in the hospital playroom. They sat with crayons, drawing a mystery scene, clues hidden in a forest. Sophie looked up, her gray eyes clear. "You're my hero, Catherine," she said, her voice steady. "Like in the books." Catherine's eyes stung. "You're the brave one, kiddo," she replied, hugging her tight. "You solved the biggest mystery, finding your strength." As Sophie left with Ellen, waving through the car window, Catherine felt a bittersweet ache. She'd done what she set out to do, but Sophie had changed her. Back at work, tending to new patients, Catherine carried a quiet certainty. Sometimes one voice, one choice, could shift a life's course. She'd faced fear, risked her safety, and found truth. And in Sophie's smile, she saw hope, a light no darkness could snuff out.